So my name is Jin. I'm one of the bioinformatics data scientists at Benevolent. And it's going to be a bit of a switch of gear because we're talking about drug discovery, which may be a bit of an unfamiliar industry to some of you here. So what on earth is drug discovery? So drug discovery is a process that takes anywhere between 10 to 15 years. But for sake of simplification, let's boil it down to 4 steps. First, it's this idea of finding a target. Typically, it's a protein that's floating around in your body or whatever that you want to hit using a drug. And of course, the next step is then finding the right drug and designing it. So just for measure, if a chemical looks like that had only 13 atoms, there's about 970-something million possibilities. So it's a huge search space to go through. But supposing that you can find something in 970 million chemicals, then you do bring it to the clinic, you have it tested, and you make sure that it doesn't kill anyone, and you make sure that it's better than the gold standard. And once it passes that, then you register it for approval, and you're good to go. That sounds pretty simple, right? Unfortunately, drug discovery is going through a rather paradoxical phase of progress. So in tech, some of you may have heard of the concept of Moore's law. It's this idea that the number of transistors doubles every year-ish. But in drug discovery, there's this thing called Irum's law, this guy says. And basically, it's this idea that cost doubles every year. And why does that happen? Many reasons, but some of which include this idea of a better than the Beatles problem. So it's this idea that if you imagine releasing a pop song, it has to be better than yesterday. I mean the song, not yes, but like the other thing is that it has to just be better than the gold standard. And the other problem is that there's an overstatement of sort of basic research discoveries. So a scientist discovers that some drug that they designed works in a mouse, and they're like, oh, it's going to cure cancer. Probably not, but that's what could possibly happen. And what this means is that we're failing patients and the wider society. So designing a drug can cost typically around $2.5 billion. And on top of that, this process, like I mentioned earlier, takes anywhere between 10 to 15 years. And even if you had a really brilliant idea to start with, chances are it's probably going to fail. It fails about over 95% of the time. And in fact, even beyond the sort of time and cost, the other problem is that the actual number of diseases that we can treat is quite a small number, and thus millions of people die every year as fallout. And what makes drug discovery an even more interesting industry as a whole is that insight doesn't accumulate anywhere near as fast as the data that comes in. So biomedical data comes at an astonishing rate. So you've got roughly 10,000, I think it's more now, 10,000 papers that are published every year, sorry, not every year, every day, in the literature. And this is not even counting like the images, tables, patents that are associated. And if we take a database that we use, which is called Chembl, which has data on how chemicals interact with proteins, that database, for example, has grown 8-fold in the last 10 years. So we see that data is increasing at a really fast rate. But in spite of that, over a 5-year period, if you compare the results between 1993 to 97 and between 2014 to 2018, the actual number of drugs that have come to market isn't very different. So what's going on here? So it's really 2 challenges when it comes to sort of data science in the world of drug discovery. One is that there is just a ton of data. There's millions, if not billions, of associations to go through, and the data itself is really diverse. So it isn't just like chemicals interacting with proteins. There's much more to be learned about patients. What kind of, let's say, sort of gene makeup do they have, et cetera. And yeah, the second point is that the human body is a pretty darn complex system. I mean, everyone here is different in every single way. So just these are the 2 problems that we come across. So in spite of all those problems, BenevolentAI has decided to tackle this head on. So what we do at Benevolent is to create and apply AI technologies to sort of disrupt the way medicines are discovered and developed. This is based on 4 separate pillars. So the first of which is having the right foundations. So that's about ingesting and harmonizing data in the correct way. This is the space that I work in particular. And once you have those right foundations, then it allows you to find the right target, then design the right drug, and then find the right patient groups to treat. And within Benevolent, it's a pretty agile, interdisciplinary environment where you've got a combination of technical and sort of domain expertise. So if this is something that sounds interesting to you, then feel free to reach out to me. During drinks and break, etc. And I mean, I've really touched upon one area that AI can be sort of used in drug discovery, but it can be used in a variety of areas. I'm not going to touch on all of these, but you can see that the opportunities are vast, and there are many aspects in which you can get involved. So in terms of the data foundations, as I was mentioning earlier, this is one of the key challenges in applying AI to drug discovery. Because you have to integrate lots of different data sources that come in both structured. So for example, it comes from a gigantic MySQL database to unstructured data. So just processing lots and lots of different papers. So it's at this stage where you require a combination of sort of core data engineering skills and a bit of domain expertise just to figure out, how to harmonize different data sources to come up with an appropriate data model for our AI algorithms. So for us in particular, what we like to do is to ingest this data and then try to model it in the form of a huge knowledge graph. So we typically create nodes out of, say, biological entities like proteins or whatever else. And then we have associations in between them, which is, again, typically extracted from either structured or unstructured data sources. And then using that, we use our combination of AI algorithms to figure out what targets to hit and how we can better treat disease. The other part of the company, as I've mentioned, is this idea of designing the right compound. So as I've mentioned, there's a huge space to filter out for what's a suitable drug in the context of, not killing someone and treating the disease. So here we apply a combination of MPO models, and we use our in-house tool called Evochem, which basically uses AI to design a novel compound that touches on a novel area of chemistry and at the same time just treating the patient. Once we do that, then we bring those compounds into the lab, test it, and depending on those results, it helps us to refine our models, and again, the cycle continues. So we own the process of data ingestion all the way to drug design and then to development and release into the clinic for testing. Great. So I'm going to switch gears now and talk about one case study where we've applied this technology on ALS, which stands for Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Say that twice as fast. And this is a highly complex neurodegenerative disease in which your motor neurons just sort of die out. And for context, this is the same disease that the ice bucket challenge was about, for context, and also what Stephen Hawking had previously. So this is a very complex disease in that the clinical presentations can vary quite extensively, anywhere from, say, dementia to a slur of speech to spasticity in muscle movement. And the etiology, so the cause of the disease, is actually really unusual as well, in that it can be both familial, so it can be inherited from your family, or it can be sporadic, so just comes out randomly, which is about 90% of the cases. It could also happen to both the young and the old, so there is no sort of discrimination there. And it's a spectrum of diseases. So what we mean by this is that you're not just going to have dementia and that's it. It can be like a mixture of those symptoms. And it's a pretty big unmet medical need. So even though only a couple of people per 100,000 do get it, the median survival rate is about 3 years. And the only drugs that are available in this area really extend lifespan by about a couple of months. And most of the time, it's about symptom management. So in this space, Benevolent decided to use this knowledge graph to find pathways. So these are in a graph sense, the easiest way to think about it is that you just have a succession of nodes that are linked to your disease of interest. So then we're investigating which proteins or targets can we possibly hit in the context of treating ALS. Using our relationship inference algorithms, we were able to identify some nodes that were previously untested for treating ALS. And on top of that, we were able to find some compounds, so molecules, that were not used for treating ALS. In particular, the unusual discovery is that we found a cancer drug, which is called Gefitinib, which was really effective in potentially treating ALS. So using some experiments, we were able to test in our labs like how good Gefitinib was, and it was able to rescue some of the motor neurons that would have been killed in ALS. But we decided not to go forward with this because it wasn't penetrating the brain as we would have liked. So we used our EvoChem platform based on this target to say, okay, what kind of novel compounds can we make and use it for treating ALS? And we found that the generated compounds were able to, and in fact more effective than Gefitinib at treating ALS in this, of course, in this disease model. But this is a continuing journey, at the same time, we were able to use this information to refine our relationship inference algorithms for further optimization. So just to conclude and just sort of reflecting on some of the lessons that we've learned, one of the big pieces of this puzzle is finding quality data. In particular, working in this space, I know that data sources can be really heterogeneous, and a lot of times it's about working out what different labs or different people are saying about the same problem. So trying to work out those differences, harmonizing that data, and this isn't a trivial problem. It isn't just a sort of, oh, let's just stick everything together. It's just about really understanding the core biology as well, and at the same time, understanding some of the computational and technical limitations in making some decisions. But of course, by having a dedicated modeling effort, and again, having a better access to different sources of data, this will lead to more powerful collaborations and hopefully to more potent cures in the long run. And we've demonstrated that the Benevolent platform is capable of uniquely owning this sort of like end-to-end process. So we get the data, and every step of the way, Benevolent owns it. It isn't just like, oh, we've done some machine learning algorithm, we're going to outsource the rest to someone, and that's the end of the story. We do every part of that bit. And it's a process that's driven by data, leading to new drugs. And as I mentioned earlier, the journey really doesn't stop here. And we're still looking for more insight, more knowledge, how to optimize our models better in order to design better drugs, because patients need it and because it matters. Thank you.